Okay, I'm assuming that it's up to us. Can we have the opening statement for the claimant?
Chief Arbitrator, if I may, would you mind if we had a few moments of pre-arbitration with opposing counsel?
Is there any objection to it by opposing counsel?
No objection. We would just like to ask that since this is an arbitration and in the interest of time, that all the exhibits be admitted into evidence prior to the start of the arbitration.
Thank you for.
Hayley,
Yes. Yes,
What's
there are
your
objections to certain pieces of evidence. We are absolutely amenable to the depositions, the wills, and the business evaluation coming in at this point. However, the other evidence we would like to is admit as we go and raise any objections at the appropriate time, if opposing counsel is okay with that.
Paul?
I mean, we would prefer to have all evidence admitted at the beginning. However, we are amenable to that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And also something that we wanted to discuss right away is the pronouns of our witnesses. Rashed Davis goes by he, him pronouns, and Jude Mcgrath goes by she, her pronouns. And if we could just ask for the pronouns of your witnesses, please.
Yes, no problem. Camden Frank goes by he, him, and Kaden Davis is she, her.
Thank you so much.
You'll repeat that when they're called, the witnesses are called, okay? So we don't get it messed up.
We would also like to ask that the witnesses be sworn in prior to the start of the proceedings, just to save time. If that's
Any objection to that?
No objection.
Okay, so would all the witnesses raise your right hand? Anybody who's going to testify, would you please raise your right hand? Okay, let's see anybody here. So hang on. We've got Jude Mcgrath, and she's a she, her, is that correct? And Kaden Davis is a she, her. And Rashed Davis is a him. Just those three witnesses, is that correct? Okay, would you unmute your,
and Camden Frank as well.
okay, I don't have Camden Frank on my screen. Hang on a second.
He's there now.
Okay. Let me double check. Okay. So with Camden, Rashed, Kaden, and Jude, those are the four witnesses, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, would you four unmute your microphones, please? Thank you. Now, do you all solemnly swear that you're going to, that everything you say today is the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello, I only heard two yeses.
Yes.
Judy says yes, Kaden says yes, Rashed
Yes.
said yes. What about Camden
Yes.
says yes?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. We've been having trouble with this little machine for a very long time. So you'll be patient and we'll be patient. It'll be good. Okay. Now back to back to the exhibits. The exhibits of Paul, why don't you tell us which exhibit, Hayley, tell us which exhibits are admissible now.
Yes, I will. So all of the depositions we've agreed, and please correct me if I'm wrong, opposing counsel, the depositions we've agreed to admit, which is exhibits A, B, C, and D. And then the other exhibits that we've agreed to admit, if you don't mind me refreshing my memory as to the letter, that would be exhibit E and F. Those are the two wills in question. And then the final exhibit that we have agreed to admit is exhibit I, which is the business evaluation of crust to crust.
Okay, so those exhibits will be admitted now.
Yes, and if I made this the final stipulation that we wanted to make is that although we're not, admitting some evidence right away, we just wanted to stipulate that all evidence is authentic and accurate, and that component we will not contest.
No objection.
Okay, fine. And, all right, so call your make your opening statement, Hayley.
Judge, I believe the claimant will go first.
I'm sorry, I had them mixed up. I thought she was the claimant.
No problem.
Okay, Paul, you're the claimant.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for telling me that before I started marking things. Okay,
Sure.
why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Paul Savousis, and I, along with my co-counsel, Bianca Bernardi, represent the claimant in this arbitration, Kaden Davis. Members of the panel, this arbitration is about opportunity. It's about a son that saw an opportunity in his mother's tragedy and took advantage of it. But before we discuss this tragedy, let's talk about how we got here. In 2001, Cindy Davis opened her own restaurant, Crust to Crust. As with all small businesses, the early years were difficult, but through hard work, she grew Crust to Crust into a local institution. And at the same time that Cindy was growing the business, she was also raising her two children, Kaden and Reese. They were a tight-knit family whose lives revolved around the business, with both Kaden and Reese working there in high school and in college. In 2008, nearly 7 years after the store's opening, Cindy Davis, with a healthy and sound mind, decided to make a will. And in that will, she split all of her assets, including the business, equally between her two children. For 12 years, Cindy never changed her will. And in those 12 years, both Kaden and Reese grew up. Kaden left Port Adair and pursued a career in nursing. After graduating in the top 1% of her college class, Kaden attended one of the best nursing programs in the country and became a highly specialized nurse anesthetist. Reese, on the other hand, decided to stay in Port Adair and work at Crust to Crust. He had created a relatively secure life. He lived at home, had a stable job, a steady paycheck, and was building a future in which he imagined one day taking over the family business. But this sense of security was threatened when on January 11th of 2021, Cindy Davis was diagnosed with terminal cancer and given only 3 to 6 months to live. For the first time, Reese's future became uncertain because remember, under that original 2008 will, Crust to Crust would be split equally between the two children. A split that would A, either leave Reese working 100% of the hours for 50% of the profit, or B, allow Kaden to sell the business entirely. Faced with this reality, Reese turned Cindy's tragedy into his own opportunity by manipulating his mother to sign a new will on March 29th of 2021. Today, the evidence and testimony will show that Cindy's mind started failing her long before March 29th. You will learn that Reese took advantage of this deterioration, that he waited for his mother's mental faculties to decline before he manipulated her into signing a new will. And importantly, you will learn that neither Cindy nor Reese ever told Kaden about the change in the will. Over the course of this arbitration, we will demonstrate to you two things. First, that Reese and Cindy were in a confidential relationship. And second, that Reese unduly influenced Cindy into signing the March 29th will. To prove our case, you will hear from two witnesses, Kaden Davis and Camden Frank, the longest serving employee at Crust to Crust and Kaden's longtime friend. Let's begin with confidential relationship. In a state of Kaplan and a state of Jameson, New Dover appellate courts have found that factors such as mental decline, restriction of access, and facilitation of one's daily needs point to the existence of a confidential relationship between a beneficiary and a testator. Here, the evidence and testimony you will hear today will show that these factors were present. First, you will hear that in March, Cindy was experiencing significant mental decline. You will hear not only from Kaden and Camden, but also from the respondent's own witnesses that Cindy would forget names, places, and even what year she was in. Additionally, the evidence will show that during the month of March, Reese restricted access to Cindy. Both Kaden and Camden will testify that Reese created a communication blackout during the days surrounding the signing of the will, in which Reese prevented them from speaking with Cindy. Now let's discuss undue influence. If the panel today decides that a confidential relationship does exist, then under New Dover law, the burden will shift to the respondent's side to disprove undue influence. However, even if the panel is not convinced of a confidential relationship, the evidence will still show that Reese unduly influenced Cindy because A, Reese's influence overcame Cindy's free will, and B, because Reese caused Cindy to make a donative transfer that she otherwise would not have made. The evidence will show that Cindy's free will was overcome because she had mentally declined by the end of March. You will hear from Camden, who will speak to this mental decline and tell you that the very day before the will signing, Cindy talked about Camden's 11-year-old son as if he was still in preschool. Members of the panel, cutting Kaden completely out of the will is not a decision Cindy would have made. Through the course of this arbitration, I would like you to pay close attention to the timing of when the will was changed and ask yourself this. If Cindy Davis really wanted to give the entirety of the business to Reese, why did she wait until March 29th to do so? Today, you will learn that Cindy could have given the business to Reese at any point over the course of their 10 years together. She could have changed her will immediately after receiving her terminal cancer diagnosis, a point when most people get their affairs in order. She could have changed her will at any point during late January, February, or early March. Instead, the respondent wants you to believe that Cindy Davis decided to change her will after a full month of mental deterioration and a mere week before she lost full consciousness. The respondent wants you to believe that at the same time that Cindy Davis's mind was failing, she somehow had the clarity of mind to change her will to give Reese the entire business. Finally, through the course of this arbitration, ask yourself, if Cindy Davis truly was of clear mind and was not unduly influenced, why would she not tell Kaden, her daughter, about the new will? If this is a change that she otherwise would not have made, why would she not have shared it with her eldest child? Members of the panel, it was never Cindy Davis's intention to cut Kaden completely out of her will. She loved her children equally in life and wanted to treat them equally after her death. With this in mind, we ask that you first invalidate the March 2021 will and reinstate the October 2008 will to divide the estates equally. And second, while we do not abandon our demand for dissolution, we are amenable to the respondent paying their half share of the estate in installments or in finding financing to pay out the amount in a lump sum. An arbitration decision in favor of Kaden is not only the fair and just outcome, according to the facts and evidence in this case, it is the only outcome that is in line with Cindy's true wishes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Hayley, you're the opening statement for the respondent.
It's me. Thank.
Pardon?
It will be me, Stutti. Sorry.
Ah, new voice. Hang on. Okay. And your Stutti, right?
Yes.
How do you say your name?
Judy.
Okay, Sudi. All right. You may open.
Thank you. Members of the panel, my name is Stutti Tilwa, and along with my co-counsel, Hayley Bork, represent the respondent, Reese Davis. This case is about greed versus grief. The respondent, Reese Davis, stands before you today asking you to uphold his dying mother's last wishes. Today, we will show you that his mother knew what she was doing when she changed her will to allow Reese to continue to manage the family business, crust to crust. The evidence will further show that Claimant was neither involved in the business, nor did they even care about crust to crust. Everything that you will hear today will point to one motivating factor: greed. The Claimant chose greed over grief. The evidence you will see and hear today, members of the panel, will reveal that since Reese Davis turned 16, he worked side by side with his mother, Cindy, at Crust to Crust. He was so proud to share in the family legacy with his mother, something that meant everything to her. Reese is here out of grief over his mother's death, and Kaden is here out of greed. Claimant chose to distance themselves not only from their own family, but also the family business. After graduating college, Claimant spent their time traveling as a nurse. Claimant did not even come home immediately to see their mother when she only had 3 to 6 months left to live. Today, in this case, there are 2 claims. Claimant asks us to uphold an outdated will from 2008 when Claimant and Respondent were still only children. Claimant further asks us to dissolve and liquidate the family business, something near and dear to their mother's heart, a business still fighting to survive post-pandemic. It is the claimant's burden today to prove to you that there was undue influence. It is their burden to show that there was clear and convincing evidence of a confidential relationship, something they will not be able to do. The facts of this case will further show that the March 2021 will was a true and clear representation of Cindy Davis's last wishes. Claimant is here to dissolve the family business. This request should be denied. The last thing that Cindy Davis would have wanted is for her pride and joy to just be sold to the highest bidder. Kaden's greed should not overcome what Cindy would have wanted. Today, it is the claimant's burden to show that my client, Rashed Davis, had a confidential relationship with his mother during the time her March 2021 will was created. We are confident that the claimant will be unable to meet this burden because it was the claimant's greed, not grief, that has brought us to this arbitration today. But if you, Chief Arbitrator, and members of the panel find that there is a confidential relationship between Rashed and Cindy Davis in March of 2021, we are confident that we can prove to you that the 2021 will is nevertheless valid. It will be clear today from the evidence we present and the testimony that you hear that Cindy Davis would never want cross-to-cross doors to shut to benefit the greed of one uninvolved child. Today, you will first hear from Rashed Davis, Cindy's youngest child and right hand. Rashed will tell you that just days after his mother's shocking and difficult death, Claimant was already sniffing around trying to collect money, wanting to dissolve the family business, an action that anyone who knew Cindy knew would devastate her. Rashed worked tirelessly for the business. The 2 of them even lovingly referred to the family business as the family sandwich empire. Rashed will tell you that he was there for his mother year after year throughout the challenges of the pandemic and throughout her illness. He was the one who helped his mother through this difficult time when Kaden did not even come home to see their dying mother. You will then hear the testimony of Jude Mcgrath, an employee at Crust to Crust, who was there when Cindy changed her own will. They will testify that Cindy knew what she was doing that day. Jude will further tell you that Cindy and Rashed were equal partners in Crust to Crust, how they sat down together to make any important business decisions. Jude will further tell you that they never even heard Kaden's name ever mentioned in any discussion regarding the family business. It was clear to Jude that Cindy would have wanted Rashed to have 100% of Crust to Crust and to keep the family legacy going. Members of the panel, by the time my co-counsel, Ms. Bork, presents her closing argument, you will have heard and seen a tremendous amount of information. Pay special attention to the testimony of Rashed Davis and Jude Mcgrath about how much Cindy cared about Crust to Crust livelihood. Claimant stated in their opening that this is a case about opportunity, and they are right. Kaden did not take the opportunity to partake in the family empire, the family dynasty. We, the respondents, are confident that you will see that the evidence adds up to one clear fact. Cindy would not have wanted her business, which meant everything to her, to just be dissolved at the greedy hands of Kaden. She would want her legacy to continue. Based on the evidence that we present to you today, we ask that you enforce the new will executed in March of 2021 so that the family legacy can continue to grow and prosper and as a remembrance to their mother. Thank you.
Okay. Why don't you call your first witness, Mr. Savoris?
Thank
Did
you,
I say
Judge.
that right?
Savusis.
Savusis, I'm sorry.
No, not at all. We'd like to call Kaden Davis.
Okay. And who is going to be Kaden Davis today?
I will be.
Okie doke.
May I proceed?
Yes, they've all been sworn in.
Yes, thank you. Hello, Ms. Davis. Could you please just introduce yourself to the panel today?
Yes, hi, my name is Kaden Davis.
Ms. Davis, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Portader.
And how would you describe your childhood in Portader?
To me, I thought it was wonderful. Since my mom was a single mother, I thought we were a really close, tight-knit family. It was really just me, my mom, my brother Reese, and Crust to Crust. Our lives really revolved around the store.
And did you ever work at Crust to Crust?
Yes, in high school, I was able to work at Crust to Crust part-time. And then also when I was at college on breaks, I would work there too.
And after you graduated from college, what did you do?
After college, I moved out of Portader to become a nurse anesthetist. And then after graduating my master's program, I joined a company called Travel Nursing. The company places nurses in high demand situations in hospitals that are short-staffed, usually for set terms of about 4 to 5 months.
And after moving away from home and starting your life working, did you keep in contact with your mother?
Yes, of course. We've always talked, usually about once a week. I mean, I was an adult living on my own for the first time, so of course our relationship changed a little bit after college. But even when I was in a different city for work, I always made sure to keep in touch with my mom by calling, emailing, texting,
And what did you do when you were not working, in between your contracts?
Well, in between my contracts, I'd always go home for about 2 or 3 weeks to spend time with mom and Reese. I didn't really have a lot of vacations, so going home and spending time with Reese and mom was what I considered to be my vacations.
Ms. Davis, I would now like to ask you some questions about your work as a nurse during the pandemic. Where were you working at the start of the pandemic?
At the beginning of the pandemic, I decided to work at a hospital in New York City. At that time is the epicenter of the pandemic in the United States.
And why did you decide to work there?
I guess I had this patriotic duty to go. At the time, it kind of felt like my country needed me, and I had years of education and training, and I thought this is where I could be the most use and really make a difference.
And how would you describe your experience?
I would say it was incredibly draining, to say the least. I was working 60-hour weeks, and it was heartbreaking watching these COVID cases continue to skyrocket. I would say those were some of the darkest days of my career. But overall, I really felt a duty to be there and help as many people as possible.
And after your service in New York, what did you do?
After New York, I came back to Portader to spend some time with my mom and Reese.
And did you offer them help during this time?
Yeah, I knew that Crust to Crust was, took a real hit, and that mom and Reese were working really hard. So I offered my mom $5,000 to help cover the costs to keep running Crust to Crust, but she refused.
And how long did you stay in Portader after your time in New York?
Only for about a month or two. I got a contract to work in Miami, Florida in November of 2020. I knew that, especially with the experience I gained working in New York during this peak, I could be really helpful to the community in Miami.
Ms. Davis, I'd now like to transition and discuss your mother's illness. When did you first learn that your mother was sick?
Reese called me and Reese told me on January 11th of 2021.
And where were you at this time?
I was working in a COVID hospital in Miami.
And were you able to visit your mother?
No, I was not.
And why not, Ms. Davis?
In retrospect, I don't know if I would have made the same decision. On the one hand, I wanted nothing more than to see my mom in her last months of life and to spend as much time with her as possible. But on the other hand, I felt like very little I could do, even as a nurse, to extend her time here. In Florida, however, I was saving lives. I was taking people on the verge of death and I was giving them new life. I decided at that time, it felt like the best thing I could do was stay in Florida. I was dealing with COVID patients every day too, so I was worried about exposing my mom to COVID because she had terminal brain cancer.
Objection as to the answer that the witness just gave. The witness is assuming facts not in evidence. Due to the confines of this competition, the answer that the witness just gave speaks to a material fact that's not within the confines of this packet. The witness said that she didn't go home because she was afraid to give her mother COVID. That's not mentioned anywhere in the deposition.
May I respond?
Keep going. I denied it.
Okay. Ms. Davis, did you communicate with your mother during this time?
Yes, when I was away, I tried to call her as frequently as I could.
And how often would you speak with her?
I try to speak with her every day, either by Zoom or calling. We would, end every call with "I love you," but I was also working around the clock in the hospital. I became worried when I started to notice that my mom was forgetting things more frequently, and it seemed to me that her cognitive abilities were starting to decline.
And when did you first notice that her cognitive abilities were declining?
It was in early March.
And how could you tell?
Well, first she said she had to get off the phone early when we were talking because of her headaches that she was suffering from. But soon after, I noticed that during her phone calls, she would sometimes forget that she was talking to me.
What do you mean she would forget that she was talking to you?
I just mean that, in early March, she wouldn't know she was talking to me. Sometimes that she would think that she was talking to Reese on the phone.
And did her condition change over time?
Objection as to the witness's lack of expertise as to the mother's condition over time. The witness, was not the mother's healthcare provider at that time.
May I respond?
Yes, please.
The witness was in communication with the mother at the time and is able to testify as to what in her own opinion, how she viewed the mother's state. It's not a mental evaluation.
If I may, Chief Arbiter.
Go ahead.
Yes, while the witness was in communication with the mother, nevertheless, they were not in consistent enough communication with the mother to speak to her physical or mental condition at the time.
Can she not speak to what she observed or heard when she spoke with her mother over time?
Yes, I would just ask that the witness limit her response to what it is that she observed and not make broader determinations about the mother's health.
I haven't heard her make broader determinations as to her health. I'm going to deny the motion. Go ahead, please.
Ms. Davis, in your opinion, did your mother's condition change over time?
Well, from when I was talking to her, it seemed like by the middle of March, things got worse. Mom would forget that Reese and I were adults, and she would think that we were still children in high school. She asked me about my high school boyfriend, like we were still dating, and she also gave me advice for studying for finals.
And during these conversations, would you ever talk to your mother about her health?
Not really, because at this point, Reese started taking the phone from my mom and cutting our calls short.
What do you mean cutting your calls short, Ms. Davis?
Well, eventually it just became Reese answering the phone. There are long periods of time where Reese wouldn't let me talk to mom at all. There was one point where I was talking with mom and Reese took the phone directly from my mom's hand.
So you were in contact or communication with Reese during this time?
Oh, yes. Actually, Reese emailed me around, I think it was March 20th, telling me to stop communicating with mom.
Ms. Davis, I'd like to direct your attention and the panel's attention to Exhibit G, or page 29 of the case file. And for convenience, we've highlighted the relevant portion of this email. Ms. Davis, do you recognize this document?
Yes, this was an email that was sent to me.
And is this a fair and accurate representation?
Yes, this is what the email said.
We would now like to move to enter this email into evidence as Exhibit G.
Okay, any objections?
Yes, I object to this exhibit as being hearsay. This is an out-of-court statement that is being offered for the truth of what it asserts.
Objection denied, it's admitted.
Ms. Davis, when was this email sent?
This email was sent on March 20th.
And can you please just briefly read it aloud?
Yes, it says, cut it out, Kaden. Mom's not in the mood to email or talk. R.
Ms. Davis, when you received this email, what did you think when you saw it?
I was really surprised. I mean, all I really wanted to do was talk to mom, but Reese kept cutting our calls short, saying that mom couldn't talk. I was also really worried.
And after this email was sent on March 20th, when did you next speak with your mother?
It wasn't for a long time. I mean, it felt like forever. I didn't speak with my mom until I came back home to Portader.
Ms. Davis, when exactly did you come back home to be with your mother and speak with her?
It was on April 8th.
So to be clear for the arbitrators, Ms. Davis, you did not speak with your mother from March 20th until April 8th.
Yes, that is correct.
And during this time, what were you thinking when you couldn't speak with your mother?
Well, at first I thought Reese was just frustrated and that he would call me back so that I could speak with mom. But I couldn't get in contact with mom for days. Then about 10 days later, after that, that cut it out email, it was around March 30th, Reese told me that he was moving mom from Tranquil Gardens back home. It was, after that conversation with Reese, I started making plans to move back home. First, I had to try to convince the COVID hospital in Miami to let me break my contract and break it early, which they eventually allowed me to do. But, there was circumstances surrounding COVID and their protocols.
And when you came back home, Ms. Davis, was Reese there?
Oh, of course. Reese lived at the house, so we spent some time together just sitting around mom. It was a really emotional time for both of us. We were, siblings, about to lose our mother, our only parent.
And how was your mother in those final days?
By the time I arrived, she was pretty out of it by then. She was mostly sleeping, getting shots of morphine twice per day. To me, she didn't really seem coherent or present.
And Ms. Davis, when did your mother pass?
It was on April 13th.
And after she passed, what did you do?
Reese and I were devastated, but we had each other and we worked together to plan and prepare for our mother's funeral service, which was held on April 19th. It was a really beautiful service.
And after the funeral, what did you do?
I stayed in Portader. I mean, I was grieving and really devastated by the loss of our mom. And I didn't have to go back to work. So I wanted to stay with my only sibling and grieve. But shortly after the funeral, I found out that there was a new will.
And how did you find out about this new will?
I found out about a week after my mom's funeral. I was looking around mom's apartment and I asked Reese how we wanted to divide everything. At the time I thought I was the executor of the estate. And that's when Reese told me that a new will was created on March 29th. And I was shocked.
And why were you shocked?
Well, I heard nothing about changing a will at all in the past 10 years. Mom never mentioned it to me. Reese never mentioned it to me. I mean, I tried to talk to my mom every day when she was sick. I spoke to Reese, but neither of them said anything. I realized that during those 10 days at the end of March, Reese had completely restricted my communication with my mother. I couldn't get a hold of anyone, and neither could my friend Camden. I was being kept from my mom. And that was when mom was getting more confused, and Reese was requesting that mom be given more pain medicine.
How do you know that Reese was requesting that your mother be given more pain medication?
I was able to look at the Tranquil Gardens patient log.
I'd like to direct your attention and the panel's attention to Exhibit K, also found on page 35 and 36 of the case file. Ms. Davis, do you recognize this document?
Yes, this is a portion of the patient log from Tranquil Gardens I was just referring to.
And is this a fair and accurate representation?
Yes, this is what I recall that the patient log said, yes.
We now would like to move this log into evidence as Exhibit K.
So admitted.
Ms. Davis, you stated that your mother signed her new will on March 29th. Can you tell us what the highlighted note sections of March 27th and March 28th say?
Yes, on both of those days, Reese requested that my mom be given more pain medication.
And in your opinion, when you see a request for more pain medication, what does that indicate to you?
My experience, it usually indicates that the patient is experiencing more pain.
Ms. Davis, I would now like to move on to speaking about your mother's will and the valuation of the business. In preparation for this arbitration, did you and Reese jointly agree to a business evaluation?
Yes, Reese and I hired a firm called Financial Trust Shield to do a business evaluation of Crest to Crest.
I'd like to direct your attention, the panel's attention, to Exhibit I, also located on page 33 of the case file, which I believe is already admitted into evidence. Ms. Davis, is this the business evaluation?
Yes, this is a portion of the business evaluation.
And just to sum it up, what does this business evaluation say?
It says that based on their analysis, Crest to Crest is worth $327,000.
Ms. Davis, I would now like to direct your attention and the panel's attention to the two wills found in Exhibits E and F on page 25, 26, and 27 of the case file. Ms. Davis, what are these documents?
Yes, these are portions of the two wills, one from 2008 and the other from 2021.
And Ms. Davis, is this a fair and accurate representation of the wills?
Yes.
We now would like, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yes.
We now would like to move these two into evidence as well.
They've already been admitted.
Oh, I apologize.
Okay.
Ms. Davis, then can you just briefly describe the difference between these two wills?
Yes, from my perspective, there are three main differences. The first is in Article 2, where Reese is made the executor. In Article 14, there's an arbitration clause that has been added. But the big difference really is in Article 4, Reese is given the entirety of Crest to Crest, and Reese and I must split my mom's remaining assets into equal shares.
Ms. Davis, how does this new will change things for you?
It changes everything. Under the 2008 will, I would get half the business and half the value of my mom's personal assets. So in total, about $164,500. Whereas under the 2021 will, I will only get half my mom's personal assets. So in total, approximately a little over $1,000. I was effectively disinherited.
Ms. Davis, I'd now like to move on and ask you some questions about your mother and the signing of the will. During that final month, did Reese ever mention that your mother's will had been changed?
No, and we were together nearly every day. Reese even called me and to tell me that he was moving mom from Tranquil Gardens and didn't mention it. And then we were around mom's bedside at home and he didn't mention it either.
At any point over the past 12 years, did your mother ever tell you that she wanted to make any change to her will?
No, we haven't talked about my mom's estate plans really at all in the last 12 years. I really think my mom was content splitting things down the middle, as she first planned in 2008.
Finally, and importantly, Ms. Davis, do you recall one of the last communications that you had with your mother before she signed the will?
Before she signed the will, yes, it was an email that she sent to me on March 12th.
Ms. Davis, I'd like to direct your attention and the attention of the panel to Exhibit G on the screen, or page 29 of the case file. Ms. Davis, do you recognize this email?
Yes.
And what is it?
It's an email from my mom to me.
And is this a fair and accurate representation of that email?
Yes.
We now would like to move this email into evidence as Exhibit G.
So entered.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, when was this email sent, Ms. Davis?
It was sent on March 12th of 2021.
And can you please just briefly read it aloud?
Yes, it says, Kaden, the nurses tell me you called yesterday and we had a good talk. Don't forget to pack your clothes for basketball practice. Love, Mom.
Ms. Davis, what is happening in this email?
Well, from what I understood, my mom is basically telling me two things. First, that she doesn't remember that entire conversation we had the day before. And second, that I needed to pack my clothes for basketball practice.
When was the last time that you had a basketball practice?
I'm currently 30 years old. I haven't gone to basketball practices in over 11 years since I was in high school.
Ms. Davis, what was your reaction to this email when you received it?
I mean, it made me really sad. Not because of the basketball practice, but because she didn't even remember our entire conversation the day before. I started to think that maybe she wasn't remembering anything anymore, because this was one of the last communications I had with my mom. I was afraid that I'd always remember her like this.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. No further questions.
Cross-examine, please.
Yes, may I inquire?
That's what cross-exam is.
Okay.
Who's
Good
talking?
afternoon. I'm speaking. Can you see me?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I got you now. Thank you. Yes.
Good afternoon, Kaden. How are you?
I've had better days, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry for your loss, and we're going to be discussing some obviously challenging subjects. So if you need a moment, please let me know, and that's totally fine with me. All right. So you became a nurse in 2018, right?
Yes, I did.
And you got that degree in North Carolina?
Yes, I did. UNC.
And then you took a job with travel nursing.
Yes, as a travel nurse.
So at that point, you did not go home to work in New Dover, correct?
No, I did not. I was working around the country in various hospitals where they had a high demand for nurses.
And in this role as a travel nurse, you make around $150,000 a year?
That sounds about right. Yes.
Okay. And the hospitals also pay for your apartment, right?
Yes, I feel really grateful to have such a good opportunity.
And you've been able to pay off all of your student loans as well.
Yes, I'm also very grateful I was able to do so.
Let's talk about your work schedule. Like you said, you've worked all over the country, right?
Yes, St. Louis, Florida, as you heard, New York.
And your contracts last around 6 months.
Yeah, it depends on the place and the demand, but 4 to 6 months about, yes.
You're never required to take a contract though.
No, I'm not required.
You signed a new contract when the pandemic hit?
Yes, at the beginning of the pandemic, I signed a contract to go work, I believe it's about 26 weeks to go work in New York City.
And your mother pleaded with you not to go, is that correct?
Yeah, I think she was really nervous, about the pandemic and everything, which very understandable.
But you took the job.
I did take the job, yes.
In New York, you would work 60-hour weeks sometimes, correct?
Yeah, it was incredibly draining, 60-hour weeks, and then, yeah, basically sleeping and then trying to call my mom and eating, surviving.
And this schedule made it difficult to keep in touch with your mom, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the shifts felt really long and, you're just running around on your feet all day. So I was exhausted really by the end of my shifts.
You weren't always able to respond to her right away.
No, I tried to talk to her at least about once a week.
Sometimes though, even days would pass before you could answer her.
Yeah, back in New York, I was, running around a lot.
After your stay in New York, you went home for a bit, right?
Yes, I was in Port Adair with Mom and Reese for about a month or two in October 2020.
And then you said that you had a particularly lucrative opportunity come up in Miami, right?
Yes, I had, it was a really nice offer, and, I felt I could use my skills that I learned in New York City. It was also a COVID hotspot at that time, so I went to Miami.
You took that job.
I did take the job to go to Miami, yes. And, it was a tough time, I think, for everybody, so.
And now we're going to move on to discussing your mother. So again, I remind you, please let me know if you need a moment. Reese called and broke the news to you, right?
Yeah, Reese called me on, I believe it was January 11th.
And you found out at that point that your mother had 3 to 6 months left to live.
Yeah, it was really hard to believe. I looked at, all the images myself, but that seemed about right.
Did you rush home to see your mother at this point?
Yeah, no, I didn't. Retrospectively, I kind of wish I did, but at the time I didn't go back because I guess I kind of used it as a coping mechanism. I knew what I was doing in Florida. But with my mom, it just felt, I guess, out of my hands.
To be clear, though, that was a no. You did not go home at this point, right?
No, I did not go home at that point.
Let's talk about your communications with your mother after she got sick. So you were working in Miami, and that means that you were communicating with your mom mostly by phone and email, right?
Yes, that's correct. And occasionally Zoom, FaceTime. Yeah, but
And you
yeah.
started noticing a mental decline in your mother in early March.
Yeah, she would have to get off the phone because of her headaches. She'd call me Reese sometimes.
You weren't physically there with your mother, though, were you?
No, this is just what I observed. And but she would tell me that she had to leave because of her headaches. And so that's kind of what I was observing at the time.
You stated that sometimes she would forget she was talking to you on the phone, right?
Yeah, call me Reese.
Did she forget that she was speaking to you on the phone every time you spoke?
No, just on occasion.
You also stated that sometimes she would call you Reese. Did she mistake you for Reese every time you spoke?
No, also just on occasion.
So there were, in fact, times when you and your mother spoke where she didn't forget anything.
Yeah, back when I could speak to her, in early March, we would have some conversations that were good. Sometimes she would, and this was back in early March. So yeah, sometimes we could communicate pretty well then.
So that was a yes. There were times when you and your mother spoke where she did not forget anything.
Yes, back in early March. Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to discuss some of the claims you've made against your brother. You claim that Reese began shutting you out of your mom's life, right?
Yeah, that's really what it felt like. In mid-March, I tried to contact my mom, emailed her a few times, but I couldn't get a response. I texted my friend Camden. Yeah, I got a snarky email back from my brother.
And you stated in your direct that you went 10 days without being able to tell your mother that you loved her, right?
Yeah, I couldn't really get in contact with her for, I think it was around 10 days.
During those 10 days, did you go home to visit your mother in person?
No, I was still in my contract, and something we were, trying to work out. And, I was getting more and more worried at this time. So no, I didn't come back during these 10 days.
You actually didn't fly to Port Adair until April 8th, right?
That is correct. I made it home on April 8th. That's when I got to see my mom.
The hospital in Miami let you break your contract early.
Yes, we had to, get coverage. It was crazy, and it was, COVID protocols and all that.
So you could have broken your contract earlier, but you did not until April.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how much earlier or anything like that. I don't know those details, but that's when I did break my contract.
So when you finally flew to Port Adair and were physically present, did Reese ever prevent you from seeing your mom?
No, she was pretty out of it by then, getting, I believe it's about 2 shots of morphine a day. So it wasn't really much to be talking to my mom about anyway. But me and my brother, we'd sit by her bedside together.
That is a no, though, that Reese did not restrict your access to your mother when you were physically present.
Oh, no. Yeah, I got to spend some, I really cherished those last few days. Yes.
Let's talk about the events leading up to this arbitration. Your mother's funeral was on April 19th, correct?
Yes, it was.
And 5 days later, you asked Reese how her estate would be divided.
I believe I asked about a week later. I could be, counting it wrong. I believe it was the 26th, but I don't know exactly.
You believe that you were cut off in this new will, right?
Yeah, well, I didn't really know about the new will. I thought I was the executor, so I really was asking because I thought that was my job. But
once you found out about this will, it was your belief that you were cut off, was it not?
Yeah, I was really surprised.
But there are, in fact, other components to the estate.
Yes, my mom had really limited assets. But yes, there are other aspects.
So the fact of the matter is that you were not completely cut out, were you?
Not 100%. I believe would have gotten about $1,000, but we'd have to look at my mom's plans.
And You noted in your direct examination that you didn't talk much about your mom's estate plans at all these last 12 years, did you?
No, I just kind of assumed status quo. Maybe that was naive of me, but I just assumed status quo.
Your mother never told you how she wanted her estate divided.
No, she never told me any different from the original will.
Still, you want half of crust to crust, right?
Yes, yeah. Well, mainly I just want my my mom's original will to be put in place because I think that's her best wishes.
You specifically do not want to be a co-owner with Reese, is that right?
Yeah, I'm open to being bought out of Crust to Crust, but you know, yeah, I think just a lot has happened between me and Reese at this point. And you know, I felt like Reese was really kind of shutting me out at the end of the life, and with the forcing of the creation of this new will, and you know, not really telling me about the will at all, I feel like it'd be kind of hard to work with Reese at this point.
You just stated that you were open to negotiating a buyout of some sort. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I mean, selling Crust to Crust isn't my main goal. I really just want to preserve my mom's legacy, and I believe I'm part of that legacy. So I am open to being bought out of Crust to Crust with either installments or financing. But you know, even if Crust to Crust is sold, Reese could still buy it, maybe with some external financing. I'm not quite sure.
You're aware, though, that the store at this point cannot afford to buy you out, right?
I am aware. That's my understanding.
So you know that at this point in time, for you to be paid, Crust to Crust would have to be sold.
Yeah, it's really sad. I mean, I love Crust to Crust. I was there, you know, at 11 years old when my mom opened it, and I worked there throughout my formative years in high school and in college. So it's not my ideal in any way, but I just would love to preserve my mom's legacy and you know, reinstate that real will.
So you want this business of your mother's that she built from the ground up, you want it to be sold, and you want your share of the money. Is that correct?
As I said, my main goal is to preserve the original will. And again, I'm open to being bought out or some installments over time. But if that's what kind of it comes down to, I'm not thrilled with it. But yes.
You stated that you're open to installments.
Mm-hmm.
That's not mentioned anywhere in your deposition, though.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure exactly word for word my deposition, but
Ms.
yeah,
Davis, isn't it true that one of your claims in this arbitration is a dissolution action?
Yes, one of my claims, I guess, is the dissolution. And I'm sorry, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not 100% sure, but really it's my main goal, as I said, was to reinstate the will.
I'm sorry, was that a yes? One of your claims in this action is a dissolution action?
Objection asked and answered.
If I may, the witness did not answer. She said that she was not an attorney, and I'm not sure I got a clear answer from her. Just trying to clarify.
Sustained.
So I'll ask again. Isn't it true that one of your claims in this, isn't it true that one of your claims in this arbitration is a dissolution action?
Yes, one of the claims is I did tell Reese that I could be bought out of the store if I received half the value. And again, I'm open to that still, but if that's what it comes down to.
So the main reason that we are here is because you do, in fact, want your mother's business to be dissolved and you want your share of the money.
Asked and answered.
Sustained.
Okay, no further questions. Thank you, Kaden.
Okay. You have another witness, Paul?
May I have time for redirect briefly?
Oh, yes, please. Absolutely.
Thank you. Ms. Davis, when you came home on April 8th, were you able to speak with your mother and have conversations with her?
Not really. She was really out of it by then. So I wasn't really able to. She was getting a lot of morphine by then.
And did Reese ever tell you explicitly that the will had been changed before your mother's funeral?
No.
No further questions.
Call your next witness.
We would like to call Mr. Camden Frank.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Yes, Camden Frank.
No, I'm asking the attorney. Sorry, I got you.
Sorry.
Yes, Chief Judge, my name is Bianca Bernardi.
Thank you. Okay.
May I proceed?
Yes, please.
Mr. Frank, could you please introduce yourself to the panel?
Yes, of course. My name is Camden Frank. I'm a resident of Port Adair and an employee of Crust to Crust.
When did you start working at Crust to Crust?
I started working at Crust to Crust when I was 17 years old, so about 12 years ago. Kaden and I have been friends since high school, so I know the whole Davis family very well. And Kaden gave me a referral to Crust, and Cindy was generous enough to give me a chance. So I've been there for a while.
What are your responsibilities at Crust to Crust?
So I'm the longest tenured employee, so my responsibilities are pretty wide, but my primary role is to be the catering manager, which comprises a significant portion of our business.
Mr. Frank, I'd like to ask you some questions about your experience working at Crust to Crust. What was it like working with Cindy Davis?
Oh, Cindy was a true mentor to me. She was one of the nicest, most caring people I've ever met. I loved working for her. She made what some people might think is a bit of a dead-end job, very fulfilling and worthwhile.
What was your experience like working with Mr. Reese Davis?
So I've known Reese for a long time, and I felt as if Reese always thought he would end up with the business, waltzing in with the heir apparent, telling me and everyone else how to do our jobs. But Reese is really just an employee with a few extra tasks. And I saw this cause friction between Cindy and Reese at times.
Did you ever see friction between Reese and Cindy over a business decision?
Yes, it wasn't just personal. I'm sorry, I should have been specific, but there were smaller and larger disagreements from time to time, but it always seemed to be about who had the power to make what decisions.
Did your experience working at Crust to Crust change after Cindy got sick?
Yeah, so Jude, Mcgrath, and I ended up picking up more hours to cover for Cindy and Reese. We obviously miss Cindy dearly. And Reese still showed, but Jude and I could have managed. So it was important for Reese to spend time over there.
Mr. Frank, I'd like to ask you some more questions about the time after Cindy's diagnosis. Did Reese ever talk to you about Cindy's health?
Yeah, and that was one of the great things about Reese still coming in. We all really wanted to hear updates about her condition and how she was doing. But then things got a little bit weird when Reese started speaking in a more controlling manner about Cindy's health, even going so far as to tell us that he only allowed her to have a certain type of juice in the mornings.
When did you start noticing this?
That was around mid-March. I remember that's when Reese was saying that Cindy's memory was starting to slip and she was getting really bad headaches.
Mr. Frank, did you ever visit Cindy while she was sick?
Yeah, I did a total of 5 attempted visits, 1 in the hospital and then 4 times at Tranquil Gardens, twice in February and twice in March.
What were the visits in February like?
So those ones Reese wasn't there for. Those were great visits. I brought my son Evan with me, and Cindy, Evan, and myself. We just spent some great quality time together, having some great conversations.
And what were the 2 visits in March like?
So those were distinct because Reese was there for those. On the 14th of March, Reese didn't let us see Cindy. He said she had just taken some pain medications and couldn't have visitors. So of course, Evan and I wanted to give them space and returned home.
What was your second visit in March like?
So on the 28th, I went alone. Reese let me in, but hovered around for the entire time I was there while I spoke to Cindy. And then Reese kicked me out after about 10 minutes. And that one really bothered me because that was the last time I really got to spend speaking with Cindy, and it was just so abbreviated.
Mr. Frank, were you able to talk to Cindy during that March 28th visit at all?
Yeah, no, the 10 minutes we spoke a bit. What sticks out is that it was strange that Cindy was asking me how Evan enjoys preschool. So that was very strange at that time.
Why was that strange?
So Evan's 11 years old, and Cindy has known him basically his entire life and had seen him just weeks before. But all of a sudden, it seemed as if she thought it was 6 or 7 years in the past.
Mr. Frank, did Kaden Davis ever ask you about Cindy Davis's health?
Yeah, Kaden and I would text intermittently. I think it was March 17th that Kaden reached out for me.
Would you recognize a copy of these text messages if I showed them to you today?
Yeah, definitely.
Turning your attention and the panel's attention to Exhibit J, also found on page 34 of the case file. Mr. Frank, do you recognize these text messages?
I do.
And is this a fair and accurate representation of the text messages between you and Kaden?
Yes.
I would like to move to enter this exhibit into the record as Exhibit J. Now, Mr. Frank, could you explain for the panel what was discussed in these text messages?
Yes. Kaden said, "Everything okay with my mom? Reese won't let me talk to her," to which I responded, "Not sure. Reese wouldn't let me visit on Sunday," to which Kaden replied in shorthand for "seriously," with some images that indicate frustration or anger, in my opinion. I'm not sure exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. I'd like to now turn your attention to Cindy's will. Did Reese ever contact you about being a witness to Cindy's will signing on March 29th?
No, not only was I not asked to be a witness, I wasn't even told that there was a new will being signed. And that was strange because I had known Cindy and Reese for so long and was with them just the day before, albeit I was only given 10 minutes. And, even though I was there, no mention at all.
Finally, Mr. Frank, how would you be impacted if Crust to Crust were closed?
I think I might lose my job, but, have to do what I think is right.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Frank.
Good afternoon.
Camden, you work at Crust to Crust, correct?
Yes, I do.
And you've worked there since you were about 17?
Yes.
And it was your good friend Kaden who helped you get this job.
Yeah, all those years ago. I like to think that hopefully I've proved my worth enough over the last 12 years to make it worthwhile for Cindy and everybody.
To confirm, it was your friend Kaden who helped you get this job?
Yeah, initially back in high school.
And you didn't go to college, correct?
No, I wasn't fortunate enough to have that opportunity.
And you're a single parent?
Yes.
So your income from Crust to Crust is your only source of income, correct?
Yeah, it's my full-time job. I don't work another job on the side, no.
So you can say that you were grateful to Kaden for helping you get this job.
Yes, definitely. And like I said, I think I've provided enough worth and expertise to the family to have made their bet on me worthwhile all those years ago.
To confirm, you're grateful to Kaden for getting you this job.
Of course.
And so you work with both Reese and Cindy at Crust to Crust.
Yes.
You said that Cindy made working at Crust to Crust so enjoyable, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't, as if it was fun every day, but you felt that she was letting you grow as an employee and, giving more responsibilities to people as they spent more time there. I wasn't stuck punching the cash register for hours every single day. Obviously, my career progressed.
But as you stated in your direct examination, your title was catering manager, correct?
Unofficial title.
And in this role, you did not make any major business decisions, correct?
Correct.
You didn't make any financial decisions?
No.
You didn't make any decisions about the future of the business?
No.
In fact, it was Reese who was making some of these decisions with his mother.
From my perspective, I saw them have these conversations. But like I said, Cindy liked to give people some latitude to grow in their roles. So yeah, it was Cindy with some advice from Reese and, seeing what was working and what wasn't working for the shop. That really determined what we did in the future.
But again, Cindy and Reese would have these conversations together.
Yeah, but once the pandemic hit, we all contributed. We were all pulling the rope in the same direction. Jude and I focused on getting delivery apps up and running, while Cindy and Reese tried to figure out other parts of the business. So in order to stay open in that tough time, we all had to be pulling in one direction, and we really did our best.
Sure. But Reese got on your nerves, correct?
From time to time. I've known Reese for years. It's a little bit of a younger sibling syndrome, I'm sure, that we just have this sort of relationship.
But you said that Cindy loved working with Reese.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't want to work with a child?
And you've worked at Crest Across for more years than Reese has, correct?
Yes.
But over the years, Cindy gave Reese more responsibilities.
And gave me more responsibilities. Yes, like I said, she provided opportunities for us all to get better and grow. She was a wonderful boss to each and every one of us.
But again, your title was catering manager.
Yes, and I started out not as a catering manager. So that's kind of what I'm trying to show. That's why we love Cindy so much. You could come in as a 17-year-old single parent with almost no skills and spend 12 years here developing as a professional, learning how things work, learning how to be efficient. So she gave me that opportunity to work up. She, was a great boss to Reese as well. We all really loved her.
And Crest Across is a family business?
Is that a legal term? I don't know. Cindy owns it. She was a sole proprietor. Was it? Yeah. So
Let's talk a little bit more about Cindy. When Cindy got sick, you visited her at Tranquil Gardens, correct?
yes,
You visited roughly 4 times.
I attempted 4 times.
In fact, you visited twice in February.
Yes.
And those times you were able to speak with Cindy.
Yes.
And you have stated that those visits were nice.
They were excellent. Evan and I just got to spend like a significant time just, having good memories, sharing conversation. Those were wonderful times.
And then you visited twice again in March.
I attempted to visit twice in March. I wasn't able to visit on the 14th.
So on the first trip, you weren't able to see Cindy that day.
No.
And on the second visit, Cindy knew who you were.
Yes.
So it's hard for you to say exactly how Cindy was doing that day.
On the 28th? I think at any point, I'm limited in how much I can tell about how someone is doing. I can just see what they say to me and how they look. I don't know. I mean, she seemed to be okay until she said the preschool thing. So that's why it was really hard to gauge, I guess. I'm sorry for the long-winded answer. It was hard to tell until she spoke.
And you now know that Cindy was in the hospital for about 10 weeks.
I thought she was only at the hospital for, I think, a little under a week, and then she went to Tranquil Gardens.
I'm sorry, Tranquil Gardens, my bad.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Was that? I apologize.
No problem. And so that's roughly 70 days.
10. Yep. 7 days a week. 10. Yep. 70 days.
And so out of those 70 days, you only visited her 4 times.
Yes. So Sundays were my days off.
So the other 65 days, give or take, you did not see Cindy, and you do not have firsthand knowledge of her condition those days.
Yeah, it was so as much as I love Cindy, I do have other responsibilities. And also, Reese was there all the time taking care of whatever she needed. So what was that? Sorry.
To confirm, you cannot speak to those other days that you did not visit.
No, when I wasn't there, I don't, other than what I was told secondhand, but I'm not sure.
And at no point did you discuss the will with Cindy?
No, I didn't know there was another will that was supposed to happen.
And you were not present at the will signing?
I didn't know it was occurring, so no.
And you have now come to know that Jude was present at the will signing?
Yes, I have come to that.
Jude has been an employee for fewer years than you have.
Yeah, I think Jude started 3 years ago.
You were still not chosen to be involved in the will signing.
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained.
Thank you, Brendan. No further questions.
Okay. Any cross redirect, Beth? Paul,
No
redirect?
redirect.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No redirect. No problem. We have no redirect and we rest our case in chief.
Okay. So there are no further questions for the claimant. How about the respondent? Do you have a witness you want to call?
Yes, respondent calls Rashed Davis. May I proceed?
Yes, please.
Could you please state your name?
Yeah, I'm Rashed Davis, the son of Cindy.
And where do you live, Reese?
I've lived in Port Adair my whole life.
And what do you do for a living?
I work with mom at Crust to Crust. It's a sandwich shop where all the sandwiches are named for sports players and teams.
And how long have you worked there?
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I started working in the store when I turned 16, and I've worked there ever since. I graduated high school in 2014 and then went straight to college, but even then I worked full time.
Let's talk a little bit more about your involvement at Crust to Crust. What were your responsibilities at the restaurant?
While I was in college, I didn't have that many managerial duties. I mostly worked normal shift work, which included making sandwiches, working the register, dishes, things like that.
And how about after college?
After college is when mom started to give me more duties around the store. I was given all the financial responsibilities, and mom slowly began working me into the managerial side of the store. And effectively, since early 2017, we've ran it together.
When you say we've ran it together, what do you mean by that?
I'm sorry, my voice here. And one more time.
When you say that you ran it together, what do you mean by that?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, and mom and I would often call it the family sandwich empire. And after closing, I remember on random days, mom would tell me that the empire would be mine one day.
How would you describe your relationship with your mother?
We were best friends. We lived together, we worked together, and we loved each other very much.
And how was working with your mother?
Like all loved ones do, we had fights about trivial things like discussing the name of the newest sandwich. But even when things got heated, I never thought that mom wanted anything other than for me to inherit. I think our discussions just kind of showed that we both cared so much about Crust to Crust, and I had to step up in the pandemic.
And how did the pandemic affect the business?
Like many other businesses, Crust to Crust really suffered.
What did you do next in response to the pandemic?
Mom and I had to make some hard decisions, unfortunately. We had to cut our hours a bit and let go of 5 employees.
Let's transition to discuss your mother's condition. When did the problems with your mom's illness begin?
Yeah, it was a terrible time. It was on January 11th, 2021. Mom woke up and she had a really bad headache and it kept getting worse. So finally I took her to the ER and I called Kaden. And within a day, we found out that she had terminal brain cancer and had about 3 to 6 months to live.
After hearing that news, what was Kaden's involvement?
It was pretty odd. Kaden has been absent for so long, just personally and from the business. And now suddenly Kaden wants to talk to mom every day. And I think it kind of hurt mom that Kaden was just too busy for all the time.
What do you mean, too busy for her?
Kaden never really made any effort to spend time with mom.
Speculation.
Sustained.
What happened next, Reese?
Her hospital stay didn't last too long. Mom was moved to Tranquil Gardens. I was there every single day. I also kept working the store, but I had to cut back my hours a bit. Employees from the store would visit on occasion.
When she was moved to Tranquil Gardens, how was her condition?
Mom started to have more bad days. She'd get really irritable. Some days she'd refuse to get dressed, eat, or even talk.
How was your mother when you said she would get really irritable?
When mom had bad days, she would refuse to talk on the phone. And when she had really bad days, she didn't want any visitors at all except for me. And unfortunately, Tranquil Gardens had a limit of visitors anyway.
Members of the panel opposing counsel, I would like to redirect your attention to Exhibit K, which has already been admitted to evidence as Exhibit K. Reese, could you please read the following highlighted sentences in pink out loud for us, starting with the note of Saturday, March 27?
Yeah, it says, Reese requests Cindy to be given additional pain medication if requested.
And what does this entry mean to you?
I mean, as I said, some days mom had bad days, and I requested that if mom wanted medication and she personally asked for it, the personnel would provide it to her.
And then could you read the sentence from Sunday, March 28th out loud?
Yeah, it says, Reese requests adjustment of pain meds will need to be okayed by staff early next week.
And what does this entry mean to you?
I'm not a doctor or a nurse. I was just there to help mom in any way that mom wanted me to. Ultimately, all of her care was handled by the staff at Tranquil Gardens.
Is there anything else that you recall about your mother's time at Tranquil Gardens?
Yeah, by mid-March, mom started talking about needing to change her will. I'd completely forgotten about the will by that point that she made back in 2008.
And how did this process work?
Fortunately, Tranquil Gardens made an exception to their visitor rule, so we were allowed to have the attorney, 2 assistants from the law firm, and Jude Mcgrath there when the will was signed on the 29th of March.
And did you read the will?
It did. It really wasn't much of a surprise to me because mom and I had already talked about the future of the store in the past without her. It was clear to me that she wanted me to have the business.
And how did the will signing make you feel?
And it's a will signing. It was really sad, but I think mom was relieved when it was all done.
In your opinion, at that time, how was your mother's condition?
Yeah, mom was having a good day that day. I was there the whole time. She was lucid. She was making conversation with Jude. And shortly after that is when she started talking about wanting to go home. I was a bit surprised, but I think a bit relieved. I just wish Kaden was there.
And where was Kaden?
Mom had been sick since January, and Kaden had made no effort to see mom during that period.
Objection, speculation as to what Kaden had done in terms of effort that Kaden had made.
If I may.
Sustained. Rephrase.
So mom had been sick since January, and Kaden had failed to come home at all during that time. They were effectively absent the entire time. Yeah, in fact, Kaden didn't even come home until April 8th, and mom passed on the 13th, just a few days later.
I know this might be a little bit difficult, Reese, but let's talk about what happened after your mother passed. Can you tell me what happened after the funeral?
Yeah, and it had barely been a week, and then Kaden starts poking around, asking about mom's estate.
And how did that make you feel?
It was weird. I couldn't believe it. Mom had just passed, and Kaden already wanted money.
And so what did you do next?
Kaden and I agreed. We hired someone to value the store, and the accountant said it was worth $327,000. And that's when Kaden demanded I pay half of it in cash. I was absolutely shocked. The store is barely surviving the pandemic. And then Kaden just wants to sell the business that meant everything to mom. It felt very wrong to me.
Why did it feel very wrong to you?
I mean, as I said before, I clearly thought that mom wanted me to have the business.
Thank you, Reese. No further questions.
Thank you.
Cross. Who's doing the cross?
Yes, Chief Judge, I will be Bianca Bernardi. May I proceed?
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Davis. I just have some follow-up questions for you.
Absolutely.
Mr. Davis, you said that your mom told you you would inherit the family sandwich empire, correct?
Yeah, she said one day the family sandwich empire would be mine.
And Mr. Davis, she said this before her diagnosis, didn't she?
Yeah, but effectively through the will as well when she wanted the new will created.
But specifically, Mr. Davis, when your mom told you in those instances you discussed at the restaurant that you would inherit the family sandwich empire, this was before her diagnosis, wasn't it?
Yeah, that specific instance at the restaurant was before because she couldn't be there when she got sick, of course.
And that is the instance you are referring to when your mom expressed to you that she wanted you to inherit the family sandwich empire.
This has been asked and answered. The witness has already provided an answer to the specific question.
The witnesses,
The witness has answered more than what was asked of him and has not specifically answered the question. If he would answer the question asked, we can move on.
Mr. Davis, yes or no? She said this to you before her diagnosis.
Yes.
And at that point, when she said this to you, her 2008 will was in effect, wasn't it?
Yeah, at that time it was.
And under that 2008 will, when she told you those things, you and Kaden would split the family sandwich empire. Isn't that true?
Yeah, at the time.
Yes or no, Mr. Davis, under the 2008 will, which was in effect at that time, you and Kaden would split the family sandwich empire, correct?
Yeah.
And she never told you that Kaden and you wouldn't inherit the family sandwich empire together, did she?
I apologize, I lost that one. Could you repeat it?
Mr. Davis, your mother never told you that she would disinherit Kaden from the family sandwich empire, did she?
Not
Objection
until-
calls for hearsay as to what the mother specifically would have said.
I'm sorry, you did that all through direct. That's what the mother said, mother said, mother said. So go ahead and answer, Mr. Davis.
Could you repeat, please?
Mr. Davis, yes or no? Your mother never told you that she would disinherit Kaden from the family sandwich empire, did she?
Not until the new will was created.
Mr. Davis, yes or no? Your mom never specifically communicated to you that she would disinherit Kaden, did she?
Well, she did specifically tell me that she would disinherit Kaden from the restaurant when she requested the will and created the new will.
It is your testimony today that your mom specifically told you she was going to disinherit Kaden from crust to crust. Yes
was
or
a-
no, Mr. Davis?
I guess no. Yeah.
But Mr. Davis, you always wanted the business, didn't you?
I mean, I loved working there, so yeah, I always wanted to be there with it.
Mr. Davis, I'm not asking you what you liked doing. I'm asking you about what you wanted. And what you wanted was to inherit the business. Isn't that true?
Yeah, I suppose so.
I'm not asking you what you suppose. I'm asking you. And in your own words, you always wanted the business, didn't you, Mr. Davis?
As I said, yes.
Now, Mr. Davis, when your mom was at Tranquil Gardens, you were there with her every day, weren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
For a minimum of 4 hours a day.
At least, yeah.
You even cut back your hours at the store to be with her, didn't you?
Unfortunately, yeah, I had to. Mom needed help.
And after moving to Tranquil Gardens, your mom had more and more bad days, didn't she?
Yeah, over time, she had more days in total, yes.
I'm not asking that she had more days in total. I'm asking whether she had more and more bad days. And that's what you noticed your mom experience. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And she would get irritable during this time.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes she would talk back to the nurses, wouldn't she?
Yeah,
She would refuse to do things.
that is correct.
So, Mr. Davis, you stepped in, didn't you?
I stepped in as a middleman.
And in stepping in, you took care of your mom's needs, didn't you?
Depending on some of her personal needs, I stepped in. If not, I served, as I said, as a middleman to convey messages to the nurse that she requested.
Well, Mr. Davis, you would change her, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's not pleasant, but I did.
And Mr. Davis, you made sure that she was getting her medication.
No, I conveyed to the nurses. The nurses made sure she got the medication.
Mr. Davis, in your own words, you made sure that your mom was getting her medication, didn't you?
Yeah, I made sure the nurses gave her medication. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
And Mr. Davis, you were the one who signed your mom up for hospice care, weren't you?
Are you referring to the hospice care that when she went home?
I'm referring to when your mother was signed up for hospice care, which happened once, and you were the one who signed her up for it. Isn't that true?
At her request, yeah.
Mr. Davis, in your statement of answer, you described yourself as your mother's caregiver, didn't you?
Yeah, I helped care for her.
You specifically described yourself as her caregiver, correct?
As I said, yes.
And after the day that your mom was diagnosed, you never again consulted Kaden, a nurse, about your mom's care, did you?
Well, I mean, Kaden was not the doctor providing medical care for her. I did my best to call Kaden, but sometimes things got forgotten. It was a busy time.
So just to clarify for the panel, you never consulted Kaden, your sibling, about any of your mom's care after the day of the diagnosis?
No, I left my mom's care to that of her nurses and doctors.
Mr. Davis, you lived and you worked with your mom, correct?
Yeah, it's a bit embarrassing, but yeah.
And from what you observed during that time, your mom was in contact with Kaden, wasn't she?
When Kaden was available, yes.
And when your mom was diagnosed, you felt that Kaden wanted to be a bigger part of your mom's life.
By means of phone and Zoom, yes, not by presence.
By means of whatever way was possible for Kaden at that time, you felt that Kaden wanted to become a bigger part of your mom's life, correct?
Yeah,
And Kaden started calling more during this time.
yeah, Kane did.
But Mr. Davis, your mom never said that she didn't want to talk to Kaden, did she?
Mom definitely turned away phone calls because she wasn't feeling well, or I had to on her behalf.
Mr. Davis, I'm specifically asking you about what your mom said to you, and your mom never said to you that she did not want to speak to Kaden, did she?
I suppose there's a matter of context there. She said she didn't want to talk to people when she was feeling ill. So by that, yes. But
I'm just
I
asking
don't
you
think
specifically whether your mom ever asked you that or ever communicated to you that she did not want to speak to Kaden. And the answer to my question is a no, isn't it?
Objection.
I just can't remember. Yeah.
I'm sorry, one at a time. What's the objection?
Counsel is testifying. Further, counsel is badgering the witness.
May I-
Overruled. Overruled. Keep going, Bianca.
Mr. Davis, your mom never told you that she did not want to talk to Kaden. Isn't that true?
I can't say I remember. I don't know.
Mr. Davis, your mom never said that she wanted Kaden to call less, did she?
I mean, I think that's the same thing. I just don't know. But she was always hurt, so she wanted to talk to Kaden.
But Mr. Davis, it's your testimony today that you don't remember what your mom told you. Is that correct?
In reference to her specifically rejecting Kaden's call? Correct.
Mr. Davis, you knew that your mom wanted Kaden to call more, didn't you?
Yeah, especially during the pandemic when Kaden was in Miami and New York.
And Mr. Davis, at Tranquil Gardens, your mom kept asking you for Kaden, didn't she?
She did.
But in March, Mr. Davis, you took your mom's laptop away.
Yeah, unfortunately, Mom ordered $300 worth of cookies.
So you took her laptop away, correct?
I had to. Unfortunately, it was when she had one of those bad days and had to make sure she didn't accidentally buy something.
You even answered an email Kaden sent to your mom, didn't you?
Yeah, after Kaden had sent a bunch to Mom and she was feeling pretty ill.
On March 20th, Kaden tried to check in on your mom through email, correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
And in that email, she said she had emailed a few times and hadn't heard back, right?
Yeah.
She said that you kept saying that your mom could not talk on the phone.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I was the middleman, unfortunately, and made me the bad guy sometimes.
And you responded to this email just 8 minutes later, didn't you?
Yeah, I believe so. It was pretty prompt.
And in that response, you said, "Cut it out, Kaden. Mom's not in the mood to talk."
I did. That was a lot of emails from Kaden, and Mom needed a breather.
Now, at Tranquil Gardens, you noticed that your mom's memory started slipping, didn't you?
Yeah, she had some occasional lapses.
On March 9th, specifically, you noticed your mom being forgetful.
Yeah, I believe so.
And that period of forgetfulness lasted for days, didn't it?
I can't recall. As I mentioned, she had good and bad days.
Well, specifically in the beginning of March, in your own words, you wrote in your diary that her forgetfulness lasted for days.
Sure.
Just directing you back to my question, you wrote in your diary that in the beginning of March, your mom's forgetfulness lasted for days. Yes or no, Mr. Davis?
I don't remember my diary.
Objection, improper foundation. The diary has not been admitted into evidence.
Mr. Davis is familiar with his diary entries as he wrote them himself, and also they were available to him prior to this arbitration, and he can speak to the contents of what he wrote.
Repeat the question, please.
The question was that in the beginning of March, he observed his mother being forgetful for days.
Answer the question.
Yes, I suppose so.
And sometimes your mom would call you by the wrong name, wouldn't she?
Occasionally, yes.
Sometimes she thought you were school-aged, correct?
Yeah, at least on one occasion.
And in mid-March, she purchased $300 of gourmet cookies online, correct?
Yeah, I thought I already answered this.
So that's a yes to my question.
Yes,
And it was in mid-March during this time that your mom talked to you about her will, correct?
yeah, that's correct.
And it was on March 25th that you called your mom's lawyer.
Yeah, she asked me to call her lawyer, so I did.
And it was on March 29th that your mom's will was changed, correct?
Yes,
You said during direct earlier that you wished Kaden was at the will signing. Isn't that true?
yeah, I wish Kaden had been more involved as a whole, but yes,
And specifically, you wished Kaden was at the will signing, correct?
yes.
But you never told Kaden that your mom talked to you about the updated will in mid-March, did you?
So I can't recall, like, it was a busy time.
Mr. Davis, you never talked to Kaden about calling your mom's lawyer for her on March 25th, did you?
I can't recall.
And Mr. Davis, you never talked to Kaden about the will signing on March 29th, did you?
No, I don't believe so. It was busy times then.
But though it was busy times, you did have time to email Kaden on March 20th, correct?
Yeah, March 20th and 25th or later is different dates.
Well, March 20th is after you talked to your mom about the will update, isn't it?
I believe it said mid-March. I don't remember the exact date, but yeah, it could be.
Just to refresh your memory, Mr. Davis, earlier we confirmed that it was March 15th. Isn't that true?
Yeah,
And after the signing of the will, you never told Kaden about the updated will. Isn't that true?
I suppose I may have forgotten.
Just directing you back to my question, you never told Kaden about the updated will, did you?
No, I guess not.
And this is despite the fact that you spent weeks with Kaden at the end of your mom's life. Isn't that true?
I mean, mom died within the week, so I didn't spend weeks with Kaden. I had a few days. Kaden came home on the 8th.
And after Kaden came home, you spent that week with her. Isn't that true?
Yeah,
And after that week, you spent more time with Kaden planning your mom's entire funeral.
yes.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Any redirect?
Yes, please. Reese, on cross, opposing counsel mentioned your mother's medication at Tranquil Gardens. Did you yourself administer any medication to your mother?
Absolutely not. Everything about that was under the care of the nurses and doctors. They managed her medicine.
Members of the panel, opposing counsel, I would like to now turn your attention to pre-mark Exhibit H in the pages 30 to 35 in the case file, which my co-counsel will constructively share on the screen. Reese, do you recognize this document?
I do.
Can you tell us what this document is?
This is an excerpt of my journal.
And are you familiar with this document?
Yes, I am.
To the best of your knowledge, is this a fair and accurate depiction of your journal?
It is.
Members of the panel, opposing counsel, I would like to offer pre-marked Exhibit H into evidence as Exhibit H.
No objections.
It's admitted.
Reese, could you please read the following highlighted sentence in pink out loud for us from the journal entry dated March 25th, 2021?
Yeah, it says, Mom thinks she's dying. She wants me to call her lawyer. I always wanted the restaurant, but not like this.
And what does this journal entry mean to you?
I mean, we talked about one day me inheriting the family sandwich empire. I certainly didn't want it through the unfortunate and rapid death of my mother.
Thank you. No further questions.
You're done? Okay. Do you have any other witnesses?
Yes.
Respondent?
Respondent calls Jude Mcgrath to the stand.
Okay.
May I proceed? Good afternoon, Jude. Thank you for being here. Could you please state your full name?
Yes, my name is Jude Mcgrath.
And where are you currently employed, Jude?
I work at Crust to Crust.
When were you hired to work at Crust to Crust?
Well, I was actually hired in 2019 by Rashed Davis. He brought me on as a shift manager.
And could you please describe what it was like working at Crust to Crust?
Well, to be honest, I'd actually never worked at a small family business before, but working at Crust to Crust is nice. For the most part, the team works really well together, and I work a full-time, predictable schedule each week, thanks to Reese and Cindy scheduling.
And what was it like to work with Reese and Cindy Davis?
It was great. Cindy and Reese have very similar personalities, and even though they would sometimes butt heads, things worked really smoothly overall, and they both ran the business super well together.
And from your perspective, who was in charge of Crust to Crust?
Well, from my perspective, Cindy and Reese were equal partners in Crust to Crust. They made the schedules, they planned new promotions, and they talked together about business strategy. To me, it seemed like they were both in charge.
Do you know what Reese's job title was?
Well, no, I'm not actually sure what his exact job title was, but I watched him run the business every single day with his mom, so I just assumed that they were equal partners and co-owners.
From your perspective, what was Kaden's involvement with Crust to Crust?
Well, Kaden was never really around. Neither Cindy nor Reese ever mentioned Kaden in connection with the store.
Okay, let's move on to discuss Cindy's illness. How did you feel about her diagnosis?
It was a shock. I had just worked with Cindy the day before, and she seemed totally fine.
And what, if any, impact did Cindy's illness have on Crust to Crust?
Well, Camden and I had to pick up some extra work, but everything worked really smoothly on the business side. Reese always ordered what we needed, and he made sure payroll was on time. Since Kaden wasn't around, it was up to Reese to help care for his mom and run the business.
You mentioned Kaden. From your perspective, what was her involvement at Crust to Crust while Cindy was sick?
Well, like I said, she wasn't around before Cindy was sick, and she didn't come around after Cindy got sick either. To my knowledge, she just wasn't involved.
Did you visit Cindy at all while she was sick?
Yeah, I actually try to visit her every week. Our visits would vary in length depending on how Cindy was feeling, of course. One time I actually showed up and Cindy just was sleeping, and Reese even told me that I could wait for her to wake up, but I decided to go home instead.
How were your visits with Cindy?
They were good. I never had any trouble visiting Cindy or spending time with her alone.
And did you notice any changes in Cindy over the course of your visits with her?
Well, at the beginning, I didn't see much of a difference in Cindy. We would have regular discussions about work, family, things like that. She was doing so well that part of me wondered whether the doctors were wrong about the cancer.
So how did you start to notice that Cindy was in fact sick?
Well, I left early sometimes if Cindy wasn't feeling well, but still most of the visits were very good.
And how did you come to be a witness on Cindy's will?
Well, Reese asked if I would go to Tranquil Gardens to be a witness on her will, and I told him that it was fine with me.
And what was the will signing like?
It didn't take very long. Cindy said hello to me by name, and she asked me about the store, but then the lawyer took over pretty quickly. It seemed fine. That's why I'm so surprised that we're even here today.
And you said you're surprised. What do you mean by that?
Well, from my perspective, Cindy and Reese were equal partners in Crust to Crust, and Reese inheriting the sandwich empire was something that had been discussed. That's why I was surprised that Kaden's even challenging anything.
Why were you surprised?
Well, because like I said, Kaden's never around. I didn't even think that she cared about Crust to Crust, let alone wanted a piece of the business. I just know that Cindy would have wanted Reese to have 100% of the business.
No further questions. Thank you, Jude.
Cross-examine?
Yes, thank you. May I proceed?
Yes.
Ms. Mcgrath, you tried to visit Cindy nearly every week while she was sick, correct?
Yeah, definitely. And it was honestly pretty great. Reese was there sometimes, and I would always have time with Cindy alone. We'd get to talk about anything and everything. It was really nice.
Thank you, Ms. Mcgrath. And during one of these weekly visits, Cindy was sleeping, correct?
Yes. And Reese actually told me that I could wait for her to wake up, but I decided that I just wanted to go ahead and go home.
Thank you, Ms. Mcgrath. If you could just please answer the questions with yes or no. Ms. Mcgrath, as Cindy's condition worsened, your visits to Cindy got shorter and shorter, correct?
Yes.
And one of your shorter visits was in the middle of March, wasn't it?
Yes, I think so.
And during this visit, just a few weeks before the will signing, Cindy could not even remember your name, correct?
Honestly, yeah, but it was just the one time. I mean, you mentioned yourself that I go to visit Cindy as often as I could every week. So the fact that it happened that one time, I think it was just a random forgetful day.
But just directing you back to my question, on this instance, Cindy could not remember your name, correct?
One singular instance, yes.
Ms. Mcgrath, you went to Cindy's funeral, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. And it was really nice. It was so easy to tell that she was loved by a lot of people.
Ms. Mcgrath, it was during the pandemic, wasn't it?
Yes, unfortunately.
And as you just mentioned, it was easy to tell that she was loved by a lot of people, correct?
Correct.
People like Camden Frank, who had known and worked with Cindy for 12 years, right?
I assume so, yes.
But Ms. Mcgrath, you had only known Cindy for 3 years, correct?
I believe I've only been working at Crust to Crust for about 2 years.
2 years. Out of all of Cindy's friends and family, you were the person who Reese asked to be a witness at the March 2021 will signing, correct?
I mean, like I mentioned, it was easy to tell that she was loved by a lot of people, but I don't really know how involved those people were in her day-to-day life. Given the fact that I'm an employee at Crust to Crust that spent so much time with them, I can see why Reese asked me to go, and that's why it was totally fine with me.
But Ms. Mcgrath, you were the only person invited to the will signing, correct?
Yes. Well, and of course, the lawyer and the lawyer staff and all of those people that handled the will signing.
But Camden Frank was not at the will signing, correct?
I can't recall. This is not something that I necessarily testified to in my deposition, so I'm not sure about this information.
Ms. Mcgrath, you can't recall who was at the will signing?
All I can recall is that I was asked to be there and that the lawyer was there with all the lawyers people.
Ms. Mcgrath, on the day of the will signing, you did not have much time to talk to Cindy, correct?
No, because the lawyer took over pretty quickly and handled the whole situation the way lawyers probably do.
And after the signing, you didn't linger because you had to go back to the store, correct?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, with everything going on, the store needed me, but I'm glad that I was able to see Cindy that time.
Ms. Mcgrath, you did not read the will, correct?
I mean, I didn't really think I had to. There was a lawyer there, and I figured lawyers know about these things.
But Ms. Mcgrath, you don't even know what is in the will, correct?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm glad that a lawyer was there who did know what was in the will.
Ms. Mcgrath, it's a very simple question.
No, I didn't know.
Do you or do you not know what was in the will?
No, I don't know. But I don't know how it could be any different from any other will that Cindy signed.
Ms. Mcgrath, once again, that is not my question. Do you or do you not know what was in the will? Yes or-
Objection, this question has been asked and answered. The witness said no.
Go ahead and answer it again. Let's make it clear because she keeps adding things and it's hard to separate it.
No, I did not know what was in the will.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay.
May I have redirect, please?
Yes, please.
Jude, when did you visit Cindy in March?
Well, I visited her twice, and the second time was the will signing, of course.
And from your perspective, what was Cindy like during that first visit?
Well, she forgot my name, but otherwise seemed totally fine.
And from your perspective, how did she seem on the will signing day?
Well, unlike that one other day in March, she remembered my name this time and asked me about the store. It seemed like a great day.
Thank you, Jude. No further questions. Respondent asks that Jude please step down from the stand and respondent rests their case at this time.
Okay. So I think we're supposed to take a break at this time and get you ready for your summations. Judge Fleck, do you know how long we're supposed to take for the break off the top of your head?
I do not know how long we're supposed to take for the break. I think it's 10 minutes.
Okay, we'll go with that.
Okay, Judge Pitlock agreed. So let's go with 10.
Okay. All right, 10 minutes and we'll be back.
Prior to breaking, could we just inquire as to time?
I need a minute to put that together.
We could discuss it after we come back from the break.
Okay, I'll have my numbers. We'll compare. That's what we've done in the past. So
Wonderful, that works. Thank you.
okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. See you guys in 10 minutes.
There was a question about time.
Yes,
Here's what I have. The claimant side has about 54 minutes and 35 seconds used up. The respondent side is at 40 minutes, 16 seconds.
okay.
And
I'm sorry. I just wanted to mention that's slightly different than what our witnesses had. We had us at 49:20.
you are, okay,
Claimant.
you're the claimant. Your witnesses, well, that, yeah, I have the opening statement included as well.
Of us too, of course.
Okay. So you have about 6 minutes less than me?
Yeah, the time that I received was 49:20.
Okay. How about respondent? What time do you have for your team?
Yes, we timed ourselves at about at having about 10 minutes left. I don't anticipate that we will need much more time than that. So
Okay. Okay. Well, I mean, I can go back and check, but I saw two very long things on the claimant's side that really kind of pushed things. And I think I have the discretion to suggest, you know, that the respondent can have 10 minutes and the claimant, I will adjust because there was a lot of objections and other things that went on. I feel like it's like European soccer league, but 8 minutes. Okay. 8 minutes for claimant and 10 minutes for respondent.
Thank you.
Okey-doke.
Okay.
So are we ready to start the summations?
yes, may I proceed?
You want to go first?
Yes, in this forum, the respondent goes first, I believe.
Okey-doke, go ahead.
If that's what it comes down to. That's what Kaden Davis testified to on cross-examination when asked whether Crust to Crust should be dissolved. Now, Kaden Davis wants you to believe that she has no real interest in what happens to the business here. But in reality, the reason Kaden is in this arbitration today is because she wants to dissolve the family business. She testified that she's concerned about the family legacy, but she's not. She's concerned about her cut of the pie. Chief Arbitrator and panel, we are here in this arbitration because Kaden Davis could not accept her mother's final wish to pass down her business to Reese, the only child who helped her run the business, the only child who helped the business stay afloat during the pandemic, and the only child who truly cares about the business just as much as she did. And we are here today because Kaden Davis chose money over her mother. She chose greed over grief. Two claims have been brought today. First, Kaden's claim that the 2021 will was procured by undue influence. And second, that Crust to Crust should be dissolved and the proceeds split between the two siblings. Two claims have been brought today, and the claimant has failed to prove either of them. Turning to the first claim, the law of New Dover and the facts of this case point to one clear conclusion, that Cindy Davis's March 2021 will is a true and valid representation of her final wishes, and it should be enforced as written. Now, New Dover law tells us that a person has testamentary capacity if they first know they're making a will, second, know the nature and extent of their property, third, if they know the proposed distribution of their property, and fourth, if they know the natural objects of their bounty. In a state of Lysander, the New Dover Supreme Court held that a will is presumed valid until the presumption is rebutted by the party seeking to invalidate it, in this case, Kaden Davis. Now, the only way opposing counsel can rebut the presumption of validity is if they prove by clear and convincing evidence that the will was procured by undue influence. Now, the court in that case also held that a will is procured by undue influence if a person overcomes the donor's free will and causes them to make a transfer that they otherwise wouldn't have made. Now, only if opposing counsel can show that Reese had a confidential relationship with his mother will the burden shift to us, the respondent, to prove that the will is valid. Opposing counsel has a high burden of proof, and they have failed to meet their burden. First, Cindy Davis had testamentary capacity. A quick look at the 2008 and 2021 wills shows that Cindy knew the extent of her property. Her assets have remained largely the same. And Cindy was clearly also aware that she was making a will because she was the one who asked Reese to call her lawyer. Now, Kaden wants you to believe that Cindy signed this will as a result of Reese's undue influence, but the facts of this case prove quite the opposite. Reese Davis testified today about how he worked side by side with Cindy at Crust to Crust for nearly 10 years, taking on increased responsibilities as time went by. We heard testimony that Cindy and Reese even discussed that one day the family sandwich empire would be his. Reese also testified today about his mother's tragic illness. He told us that their mother would have bad days and that she'd even have days where her memory slipped. But Reese's testimony also shows that he always followed their mother's lead and prioritized her health and comfort above all else. In a state of Kaplan, the New Dover Supreme Court held that even though the testator was sick and had some periods of mental fogginess in the months leading up to the will signing, the respondents did not exert an undue influence over their father because they never restricted access to the testator. Now, the court noted that although respondents likely had influence over the father, they did not exert an undue influence to overcome his free will. Now, this case is on point with the state of Kaplan. Yes, Reese may have exerted an influence over his mother. We do not contest that. Reese was the only child around to take care of her. But as the court in the state of Kaplan noted, mere influence cannot be conflated with undue influence. Now, the fact is that throughout her illness, Reese never restricted in-person access to his mother. Jude Mcgrath, who visited Cindy every week, testified that she never had trouble seeing Cindy. We heard that the only time Camden Frank wasn't able to have a visit with Cindy was when she had taken some pain meds and was too tired to engage with him. Now, while there were times when Cindy didn't have the strength to respond to texts or emails, at no point did Kaden try to visit her mother in person. Instead, she waited out the winter in Florida and did not come home until 3 months after Cindy's diagnosis, a mere 5 days before her death. We heard testimony from Kaden that the hospital in Miami let her break her contract early. Why didn't she break the contract in March when she claimed Reese was being controlling? These are questions we don't have the answers to. And members of the panel, Kaden does not allege that once she made the effort to see their mother in person, Reese denied her access. Quite the opposite. Kaden herself told us that once she actually did make it home, she never had trouble seeing her mother. Reese did not restrict her access. Now, Kaden claims that Cindy wouldn't have given Reese 100% of the business had it not been for his undue influence over her. However, what the evidence has established today is that Kaden was in no position to know what Cindy wanted. Now, we heard that Kaden hasn't spoken to Cindy in over 10 or 12 years about her estate. Now, the reality is that Kaden was surprised that Cindy gave Reese 100% of the business. And this makes sense. Kaden wasn't around to see how Reese had stepped into the role of co-owner. The reality is that Cindy signed the March 2021 will in accordance with the law, with witnesses, and in the presence of her lawyer. Now, the reality is that when Cindy signed her will that day, she was acting exactly in accordance with her wishes, and those wishes were to see Crust to Crust live on under the ownership of Reese. Finally, what you did not hear today was evidence that Reese had a confidential relationship with Cindy. In the state of Jameson, the New Dover Supreme Court found that there was a confidential relationship where the father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and the respondent, his son, lived with him, was named as his conservator, and took over 100% of his father's daily care. This case stands in stark contrast to the facts presented here today. Reese was very present in his mother's life after her diagnosis, but her medical and personal care were always ultimately in the hands of the staff at the hospital and Tranquil Gardens. The nurses' logs make that clear. Reese never attempted to become his mother's conservator, nor did he live with her after her move into the hospital in January. Now, this case is not analogous to a state of Jameson because there was no confidential relationship here. Now, even if you, Chief Arbitrator, and members of the panel, were to find that there was a confidential relationship between Reese and Cindy, we are confident that we have carried our burden to prove that the will is valid and not the result of undue influence. Now turning to the second claim for dissolution. Because Cindy's will is a true and valid description of her final wishes, the dissolution action should be denied. This case boils down to greed versus grief. Rashed Davis is here out of grief over the loss of Cindy, and Kaden Davis is here out of greed. She wants half of Crust to Crust, even if that means selling Cindy's prize business. Under New Dover law, a joint owner of a business may bring an action to dissolve the business. However, New Dover courts will not force a sale if the co-owners can negotiate a buyout. Here, if the 2008 will were to stand, Kaden and Rashed would be co-owners of Crust to Crust. But as you've heard today, Crust to Crust cannot afford to buy Kaden out. So if the 2008 will were to stand, Crust to Crust would have to be sold or dissolved. And if we have learned anything today, it is that Cindy Davis would not have wanted her business dissolved. Members of the panel, Kaden Davis did not file this action because she thought the 2021 will was against Cindy's wishes. No. She filed this action because she does not like how her mother decided to divide her estate. It's against Kaden's wishes. But this is not about Kaden's wishes. It's about Cindy Davis's. This arbitration is about what happened on March 29th, 2021. It is not about Cindy excluding Kaden or cutting her out. It's about preserving the legacy of Crust to Crust. And the evidence you have heard today clearly shows that Cindy Davis wanted her closest child and business partner, Rashed, to inherit Crust to Crust and continue the legacy they built together. What Cindy wouldn't have wanted is her business sold to the highest bidder. Members of the panel, we are simply asking you to rule in accordance with the presumption of New Dover law that Cindy's will is valid. And considering all the evidence and testimony you've heard today, we ask that you rule in favor of the respondent on all claims by upholding the 2021 will and denying the dissolution action. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Claimant.
Thank you. May I proceed?
Yes.
Members of the panel, Rashed Davis always wanted Crust to Crust. And when he saw his window of opportunity, he grabbed it. For years, Rashed worked at Crust to Crust. He took on different roles, and Cindy gave him varying responsibilities. But Crust to Crust was Cindy's business. She was the sole owner. And just because Cindy appreciated Rashed's commitment did not mean that she was ready to change her will and give Rashed the entire business. But when Cindy got sick and Cindy started losing her memory, Rashed knew it was his last chance. Without consulting Kaden, Rashed made the phone call to Cindy's lawyer. Rashed arranged the will signing. Rashed turned Cindy's tragedy into his opportunity. Today, through clear and convincing evidence, we established two things. First, that Rashed and Cindy Davis were in a confidential relationship. And second, that Cindy Davis changed her will under undue influence from Rashed. But first, let's discuss the confidential relationship that exists between Rashed and Cindy. Members of the panel, no one factor alone or list of factors is determinative in establishing a confidential relationship. Rather, in a state of Kaplan and a state of Jamison, New Dover courts have considered factors such as mental decline, taking care of an individual's needs, and restricted access to determine a confidential relationship. The facts showed that all of these factors were present in today's case. Throughout today's case, we heard evidence of Cindy's mental decline. Rashed shared that after moving Cindy to Tranquil Gardens, Cindy started having more and more bad days. By the beginning of March, Cindy was experiencing forgetfulness for days. And members of the panel, we saw one of the last communications that Cindy had with her daughter, Kaden, when she told her on March 12th to pack for high school basketball practice. You also heard from Rashed himself that he was Cindy's caregiver and took care of Cindy's needs. When Cindy refused to listen to the nurses, Rashed stepped in. Rashed cut back his hours at the store to be with Cindy every day. Rashed would change her. Rashed would find her food that she would eat. Rashed would make sure that she was getting her medication. And Rashed never consulted anyone, even Kaden, who is a nurse about Cindy's medical decisions. Reese also restricted access to Cindy. Members of the panel, after a year and a half of the pandemic, we all know how important technology is to stay in touch with each other. You heard from Kaden that she was able to call, text, email her mom up until March of 2021. But in March, Reese restricted their access. Reese admitted that he knew how much Cindy missed Kaden and that Cindy even asked for Kaden at Tranquil Gardens. But Kaden shared today how Reese wouldn't let the two talk on the phone and that several times Reese took the phone away from Cindy while she was on the phone with Kaden. Members of the panel, you saw the email that Reese was able to send from his mom's email account. When Kaden reached out to his mom on March 20th, she wrote, "I've emailed a few times and haven't heard back." Reese responded only 6 minutes later saying, "Cut it out, Kaden. Mom's not in the mood to email or talk." Members of the panel, ask yourselves, if Cindy was still having enough good days to update her will on March 29th, why couldn't she answer her daughter for days? Members of the panel, Reese's relationship with Cindy went further than what a daughter would do for their mother. The evidence shows today that when Cindy got sick, Reese wasn't just holding her mother's hand, she was forcing it. Under New Dover law, when a confidential relationship is established, the burden of proof shifts to the respondent. The evidence shows that Reese and Cindy had a confidential relationship, and it was the respondent's burden in today's case to prove the validity of the will, and they failed to meet that burden. But even if it is deemed that there was no confidential relationship and the burden was not shifted to the respondent, the evidence still shows that Cindy changed her will under undue influence from Reese. This leads to our second point. In order to prove that Reese exercised undue influence, it must be established that first, Reese's influence overcame Cindy's free will, and second, that Reese caused Cindy to make a donative transfer that she otherwise would not have. Members of the panel, we established both of these elements because we know what Cindy, out of her own free will, wanted. She wrote it in her 2008 will. Today, Reese testified that Cindy promised the family sandwich empire to him. But members of the panel, in no way did that mean that Cindy would disinherit Kaden. In 2008, Cindy made a will splitting crust to crust equally between her two children. And for the past 12 years, despite any and every change in the Davis family dynamic, Cindy never changed that will. Even when Cindy was diagnosed in early January and given 3 to 6 months to live, she didn't change her will. Members of the panel, I'd like you to ask yourselves, why would Cindy Davis wait until March 29th to update her will? What changed then? Today, we learned what changed then. Members of the panel, we know that in January and February, Cindy was mentally well. She was regularly in touch with Kaden and was visited by Mr. Frank and his son, who were able to have hour-long conversations with her. And during this time, Cindy Davis never talked to anyone about changing her will. But that all changed in March. By mid-March, Cindy was forgetting her friends' names, her children's ages, and even had to have her computer taken away for buying $300 of cookies online. It was during this time that Cindy's will was changed. Reese called the attorney. Reese arranged the will signing. Reese invited Jude Mcgrath, who was hired just 2 years before, to be a witness. But members of the panel, Ms. Mcgrath testified today that she can't even remember who was present at the will signing. Opposing counsel tried to tell you that on the day of the will signing, Cindy seemed completely normal, but no one had more than a brief conversation with her on that day. Opposing counsel also tried to say that this case is about greed over grief and tried to paint a picture of Kaden as greedy. But members of the panel, it is the respondent, Reese Davis, who is arguing that their own sibling should be disinherited. It is Reese who is arguing that they should inherit $327,000 while Kaden inherits $1,000 and the value of half of the value of a 10-year-old sedan. Who is really greedy here, members of the panel? And what is the reason that the respondent provided for this change? Because Kaden Davis wasn't physically there when she was working at the front lines of a pandemic? Members of the panel, Rashed Davis told you himself he always wanted crest to crest. And when he saw his window of opportunity, he grabbed it. May I conclude briefly?
Yes.
Rashed turned Cindy's tragedy into his opportunity. And for that reason, we request that you first enforce Cindy's 2008 will, and second, enforce the claimant's request for a dissolution of crest to crest. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of the arbitrators have any questions? Judge McDonald, any questions?
This time.
Okay, no questions. All right, so then we've concluded and the judges are ready to enter their ballots. Okay, and they tell us that they have the results.
Yes. Are y'all ready? I know you're ready. You've been waiting really months and months actually for this moment. So we will get right to it. Again, congratulations for making the final round of the 2022 arbitration competition. And so I'll just jump right to it on behalf of the American Bar Association. Of course, we did have teams number 4 and 7 competing. So team number 4 is Fordham University School of Law, and team number 7 is Brooklyn Law School. And the champions of the 2022 ABA National Competition is Respondent, team number 7, Brooklyn Law School. With a split ballot, I should say, so very, very tough competition, which is what we expect in the final round. So it's always awkward then in a virtual setting too. It's like, what do? You clap and you say, team number 7, it's okay to like show some expression.
Thank you, everyone.
You're national champions.
Thank you, Fordham, for a really, really great competition. It's been good to compete against you again, and it's been wonderful. Thank you.